Hey, I'm Mike from Retro Boost. We're going back to the N64 today, specifically the controller. Now this is a topic that I've touched on before, talking about the RetroBit Tribute 64 wired controller, which is a great priced third-party controller for the N64 that's not only a controller, but a completely redesigned controller, giving it a kind of modern twist on that very, very dated old design. N64 controller is something of a controversy for me. On one hand, yeah, it's the first 3D console Nintendo made, so of course there's learning opportunities. It isn't like every other company was flawless out of the gate. Sony's original controllers didn't even have analog sticks. The original Xbox controllers were too big, the Duke. So everyone struggled initially, but the N64 controller is so unique because of just how alien the dang thing looks. It has 3 gripping points, trigger on the bottom, shoulder buttons. There's no way to be in a position to get at all the buttons unless you have 3 arms. But then again, that's the whole point, because depending on the game, you're holding it in one of 2 different ways. Either a game uses the analog stick for movement, or it uses the D-pad for selecting things, like say Kirby and the Crystal Shards in Pokemon Stadium. They don't use the analog stick. So it's just odd how the controller has like 2 modes, basically. It's so bizarre. But we have options now. As we go into the modern era of new accessories and more sophisticated ways of emulation or modernizing our retro console experiences, the accessories have followed. And we now not only have wireless controllers for the N64, but these are like reimagined N64 controllers. And this is where the N64 is so cool and unique, because you don't really see this for other game consoles. There are wireless options for like every game console out there. Super Nintendo has wireless controllers, Genesis does, everything does, but they're normally just wireless versions of the same controller. With N64, because of the opportunity with the old design, we're not getting just wireless, we're getting completely reimagined controllers. So I'm going to go over 2 of the big ones that I've come to notice. The Tribute 64 Wireless by RetroBit and the Brawler 64 Wireless by Retro Fighters. I'm going to go over each one, go over my experience playing the same 3 games with each one of them, talk about what happened with each of them, go over their basic features and my opinions of both of them. So here we go, let's jump right in. First, let's talk about the RetroBit Tribute 64 Wireless. Now, I talked about the wired version of this controller a while back. Believe it or not, they're not the same thing. It isn't just a wireless version of the same item. They're actually different. First of all, the wireless controller is a little bit larger. The reason for that is they changed the design. So the D-pad is sitting a little more directly under and to the the right of the analog stick, whereas on the wired version, the D-pad was like dead center. That's a great improvement, because the D-pad being dead center on the wired one meant that playing games like, say, Kirby 64 was just uncomfortable, because your thumbs would be colliding between the right D-pad button and the A button as you played the game. So already we're off to a great improvement of the existing product, but now it's wireless. As far as how it works being wireless, it has a dongle type device. This plugs into whichever controller port you want to use. You can use multiple of them, you can get 4 of them, it's fine, and you can plug them all in. They do have support for controller packs on there, which is a nice thing. Both of these products do that, which is great. There's also a switch that toggles between R and M. M is for the controller packs to pull from like memory. R is rumble. When you have it set to R, that allows for the controller to vibrate and rumble as if there was a rumble pack attached to it. There's no need to actually take the real rumble pack and like plug it into this. You don't need to do that. If you do, it'll work. But the problem is it's gonna vibrate so much that it'll shake itself like out of it, which is what happened when I just tried to test that. So don't do that. There's no reason to own a rumble pack if you have this guy, which is a neat bonus. So it's pretty cool. The way that the controller works with regard to that, it does affect the battery life, because with it being wireless, it does use rechargeable batteries. They both do. Supposedly, the recharge life of the Tribute 64 is toward 25 to 30 hours if rumble is turned off. If rumble is turned on, the estimate's more like half that, 10 to 15, depending on your play. So it does wear down the battery faster to have rumble enabled, but the game in question has to have rumble support, which most of them do. Rumble feature itself does work quite well. It's very, very neat that it has that. In terms of the buttons themselves, the Tribute 64 really goes to emulate the original N64 buttons. They feel very similar. They have that same shine to them, similar feel to them. All in all, very good. But where you find the differences are with the stick and the triggers. So firstly, you have two Z buttons, Z left and Z right. I really wish that the bottom trigger on the right side was R instead of Z. Because playing like, say, Star Fox 64, it would feel more natural if both of my fingers were at the same elevation on the bottom of the controller, banking left and banking right. That would have felt really good, but you can get used to it otherwise. And then the stick itself is a much smoother, tighter responding analog stick. It's soft to the touch. It has the same aesthetic as the N64 controller. It grips your thumb real nice. All in all, great design. If I have any critique, it's just that I wish the shoulder buttons had R on the bottom, or at least if they were assignable, that could fix that. They are not. There are different assignable like macros you can use, but this is only if the controller is being used as a Switch or PC-esque controller, because you can actually use it on other things other than N64, which is a bonus. I'm not just using it for N64 myself, but there are ways to change it to make the trigger be R, but not when using it on N64. Just as a heads up. Slightly disappointing, but all in all, great controller. I don't really have much of any complaint really to make of it. It worked reliably. Plugged it in, it pairs up. Recharge is simple enough, only takes like 2.5 hours to charge it. Uses USB-C, comes in the box. Tight, responsive, buttons easy to press. I got no real complaints other than the D-pad being a little bit sharp. The D-pad is responsive and good, but it is kind of pointed, so when just pressing like playing like Kirby and stuff, it starts to wear on your thumb a little bit. It wouldn't be too fun to play like all of Kirby and the Crystal Shards with this controller. Other than that though, solid controller. Very, very good. You really wouldn't be disappointed with it at all, even with the sharp D-pad. I mean, you can deal with that, but it's not the best. But yeah, very good. Let's check out how the Brawler compares. The Retro Fighters Brawler 64 is way different. As I hold it, the first thing it makes me think of is like a Switch Pro controller. It's a very similar feel to it, whereas the RetroBit Tribute 64 is like a mixture of being something totally unique or like a slim Xbox controller. It's floating somewhere in between, but this one feels familiar. I feel it right away. It's a good grip to it. The material is also different as well. This is more like a matte plastic kind of feel to it. I kind of like how it feels versus the Tribute 64's material. The buttons are also a lot different too. They don't have that emulated N64 feel. They kind of have their own thing going for them. Pressing the A button is a little bit easier and like faster to do, in my opinion at least, on the Brawler 64. Well, really tapping any button faster, but it's interesting how like different they are. The D-pad's also different too. The D-pad on the Brawler 64 is much flatter and a little bit wider even, which makes it far more comfortable for playing games like Kirby 64 on. It's very good. The one thing I can say I don't like by comparison is the shoulder button. The way that the shoulder buttons are curved, it's just a little bit awkward to like reach them. There's like different ways you can position your finger, but none of them are like perfectly comfortable. Hard to like explain, but if you're holding it in your hand, you kind of get it. You can get used to it, but I can see that playing like, say, Mario Kart 64 for 10 hours straight would get a little fatiguing on your finger doing drifting and stuff with it because of how you have to reach your hand up to press the buttons. The stick is also different as well. This one is not going for that same like N64 type aesthetic. It's a solid top, but it does grip very well. It feels comfortable, it feels responsive. One thing that's worth noting is as I play the different games with it, for some reason, I just can't like reliably do triple jumps in Mario 64 on the Brawler wireless controller versus the Tribute 64. I'm not sure what's doing it, if it's just the difference in how the buttons are being pressed or the stick, but there's just something different performance-wise with this controller than the Tribute 64 is. And I don't really understand what the deal is, but I can only like hypothesize that it's something with how the stick is performing, or something with how the buttons are being pressed, like how that information goes to the console. I don't know. It's really interesting. The other detraction is that it does disconnect a fair amount. I was having a lot of trouble getting this controller to pair and stay paired as I was playing with it. Like a substantial amount of trouble. It's really bizarre. And I found, I think I fixed it, but it's a really weird fix, and we'll get into it now. So that brings us to the topic on the dongle. So the dongle itself just goes. It's worth noting that the RetroBit dongle has like an actual pairing button and you pair them. The Brawler does not. The Brawler dongle just searches for its controller and then it'll find it. You pair it up. You can do a factory reset on the controller if you're having trouble pairing to it, but you plug it in and it goes. Much like the Tribute 64, it supports control packs. I do like how the control packs go like flush in there when they're inserted. It looks real clean and nice. I like that. But there's no rumble support, no rumble pack support. The controller won't vibrate. That's not like a huge deal breaker. But the weird thing was, it wasn't until I had a controller pack inserted that the controller reliably stayed paired. That was the change. I put a controller pack into it just to see what would happen, and the controller would stay paired, and then it would work. So, okay. Before that, it was disconnecting like every 10 seconds. I would get it to pair, I would play for a few seconds, and then it would die again. It was very, very frustrating. But once the controller pack got inserted, I was good to go. So I'm not sure if that's just like a problem with the whole thing, or if maybe mine's defective. I'm not sure. Once the controller pack got inserted though, off to the races, and the controller performs very, very well. It's comfortable to hold. I didn't have any real problems playing any of the games I played with it. Like I said before, because of how the buttons feel and how they press, I felt like rapid button pressing on the Brawler is a little easier to do, and the D-pad is more comfortable than the Tribute, like straight up, that was better. But there's also one more new thing. There's a turbo button, so that's fun. A lot of third-party controllers have turbo buttons. The Tribute ones don't, and I feel like they don't because they want to be classy. A classy controller has no need for a turbo button. But Retro Fighters says, no, we're gonna give you everything. So, got a turbo button. It was a lot of fun to just like turbo my way through a Star Fox 64 boss fight and just demolish it. That was pretty cool. Additionally, the triggers are different as well. We got Z and Z, so they're both Z. Again, I really wish this was R for the reasons I mentioned before, but the triggers are different. These are more like modern controller triggers. They really remind me of like PlayStation 3 especially, but they feel good. I don't like how the R button has to reach out a little bit to press it. Like you can see here, like Z's good, R, I'm flexing a little bit to do that. Like my hand's like clawed style here, but all in all, it's got some problems, like saying synced, didn't like that. That's a problem. The R grip is a little weird. That's a minor problem. But all in all, I love how it grips. I love the texture of the buttons. I love the flatter D-pad. I think the bonus of a turbo button is a nice thing. I like the aesthetic of the dongle being flush, because the RetroBit one is not. It does stick out a little bit, although give and take, RetroBit has rumble feature, so interesting. This does not. All in all though, pretty awesome. Let's summarize. All right, now that we talked about both, let's do some last comparisons and go over my final thoughts. So number one, they're both wireless, duh. They're both rechargeable. Battery life is different though. Battery life on the Tribute is purported to be 25 plus hours with no rumble feature, whereas the Brawler is around 10. So that's interesting. They're both rechargeable using a USB-C cable, internal charging, internal rechargeable battery. That's cool, awesome. The Brawler has the more accentuated triggers. It has the flatter, matte buttons, and more, I would say, I want to use the word modern just because this is just how a lot of controllers just kind of feel nowadays. A more modern design. Flatter D-pad, the presence of a turbo button. So that's great. The Tribute 64 goes to emulate the N64 with a modern twist. So the buttons really feel like an N64 controller. They have that rounded like not like glossy, but like reflective and shiny plastic kind of feel to it. The D-pad is sharper, it's not as comfortable, but it is positioned better than the wired Tribute 64 controller is. The stick, I think, is the strong point though. The stick feels really, really good. It grips nice, it has that N64 aesthetic to it, so this looks like a modern N64 controller. This has the look, is what I think is its strong point. Very interesting. The Tribute 64 also supports Rumble, which is really cool, because that's a separate accessory you'd have to use otherwise, whereas the Brawler does not support Rumble. So, give and take on both sides. My final thoughts. The Tribute 64 was a more reliable controller. It never had any problems with pairing or becoming disconnected, whereas I did have a lot of trouble with the Brawler as I attempted to use it that wasn't remedied until I inserted a control pack into the dongle, which I'm not sure why that would make it work, but that's what happened. Once I inserted that, I was good and didn't have any other problems. Additionally, the Tribute 64 was the more like reliable controller in terms of just like doing tricks in games, like triple jumping and wall kicking in Mario just seemed to be easier to do for some reason. I'm not sure really why with the Tribute 64, although the Brawler I didn't have any serious problems with. I mean, yeah, I couldn't do like triple jumps reliably, but I didn't have any problem like say winning Mario Kart on the hardest difficulty or blowing my way through Star Fox and getting a medal on Corneria. The presence of a turbo button is also a fun bonus for certain games too, although if you have to tap it out, I feel like the Brawler 64 is the easier one of the two to like tap with. For some reason the button just lends itself to that with the way that it feels. I just like it more. So I guess, despite its flaws and shortcomings and issues I had, I think I personally prefer the Retro Fighters Brawler 64. I like how it feels, I like how the buttons press, I really like the D-pad. I think this one has like all you want. There are some additional bonuses that you get with the Tribute though. So if you're looking at like a value situation, I mean the Tribute does get you Rumble, but it also gets you the USB option because you can use it on like say a Nintendo Switch. I'm pretty sure you can use it for PC as well. So there's a lot of things that this can do beyond just N64 that the Brawler can't go for. Bottom line is they're both very good. I mean, it isn't like one's bad and one's not. They're both great options for someone who's a real N64 enthusiast, but you want to play your games with a bit of a modern twist, a modern edge, a better feeling controller. It's more comfortable. You know, I'm gonna play this for 2 hours, and then I'm gonna take a break, and I'm gonna go play Xbox, and I'm not gonna have a problem with the controller being like, oh, this feels different. Like, great. They both do that very well. So, awesome. Hope this was informative to you, showing you both of these controller options. Had a lot of fun playing with them and will continue to do so. So thank you for joining me today. It was a blast. Sorry for the delay on the video. I've been sick as I film this right now. God almighty. Ugh. I've been sick. It's been hurting production across the whole board. So this video took a lot longer to get than I thought that it would. So I apologize for that. If you liked the video, feel free to subscribe. It helps me grow the channel. If I could talk, that would be awesome. Thanks for bearing with me. Have a good rest of your day.